Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Screenheart tutorial series. In this episode, we will be covering lighting is very critical. Simply put, if you can't see it, don't film it, unless you're going for that dim early morning, evening, or dramatic look. But if not, poor lighting leads to a picture that's grainy and dark, and you don't want that. So, let's get down to ways which we can improve our lighting. You always want to be aware of the different sources of light that's around you. Now, depending on whether you're inside or outside, that could be the difference between sunshine or a single light bulb in a cold, dark room. Depending on whether your light source is too bright or too dim, you may have to adjust your settings on the camera to compensate. If you have a smartphone, these changes are going to happen automatically as you move around. That seems so convenient. But the great thing about a dedicated camera is that it gives you more flexibility to change the brightness of an image, and you can do it through 3 settings: iris, shutter speed, and ISO. The iris functions similarly to the human eye in that when you open it, more light hits the camera sensor, making the image brighter, and when you close it, that limits the light hitting the sensor and the image becomes dimmer. The iris is usually adjusted with some sort of wheel on the camera. In the case of this Canon DSLR, it's right next to the viewfinder. On the display screen, the iris is marked as a decimal. The lower it is, the brighter the image. The higher it is, the dimmer the image. At number 2 is shutter speed. Think of the shutter as this door that's in front of your camera's image sensor, and how fast it opens or closes determines the shutter speed.
Let me just memorize it. Ah!
You can adjust the shutter speed with another wheel on the camera. Again, in the case of this Canon DSLR, it's the smaller wheel that's on top. In video, a high shutter speed limits the amount of light that hits the sensor, whereas a low shutter speed does just the opposite. As a general rule, do keep your shutter speeds at 1/50th or 1/60th of a second. That shows up as 50 or 60 on your display screen. At number 3, we have ISO. ISO measures how sensitive your camera is to light. Don't get this confused with iris or shutter speed, because those two limit or increase the amount of external light that hits your camera's image sensor. ISO, on the other hand, operates independently of light. You can adjust the ISO by pushing a button to bring the settings on screen. You'll see that ISO is measured usually from 100 to some ridiculously big number. Don't ask me why. The higher your ISO is, the more sensitive your camera is to light. Now, you might be thinking at this point, well, gee, why can't I just adjust the ISO and forget about the iris and shutter speed? Well, that's because if you only adjust the ISO, then bad things happen. The major drawback of ISO is that it operates independently of external light. So when it's pushing the image to be brighter, it's actually creating this fuzzy, grainy texture. Again, as a general rule, when you're adjusting the brightness of an image, it should be iris first, shutter speed second, and always keep ISO last. Even then, I wouldn't recommend you taking it above 1600 because that's when the grain really becomes unbearable. Thanks so much. That is it for basic lighting and brightness adjustment. If you have any questions, send them to this email. If not, then continue and I will see you in part 3 of the Screenheart tutorials.